everyone. Hope you're having a great morning wherever you're connecting in from. It's really great to have you joining us for our webinar this morning. I'm Sarah Whiteman from Acteon. Over the next hour, we'll be sharing ideas and examples of how to harness the power of music to really make learning and communications campaigns stand out. So in a moment, I'll hand over to my colleagues Owen Rose and James Woodman, who are Acteon partners. I know there's lots of you on the webinar who already know us, but for others, here's just a little bit of background about us for context. So Acteon is a communication and learning agency, and our work is focused on helping people and organisations achieve positive change. And we do that by working in all sorts of different areas. We work across compliance, onboarding, leadership, operations, change, and other areas as well, and for all sorts of different clients. We create solutions based on whatever best fits our clients' objectives. So that can be in a wide variety of formats, from the kinds of music and videos that you'll see this morning to virtual workshops, from e-learning to escape rooms, all kinds of other formats. And we provide the experience and insights to help our clients define their strategy and to test and evaluate different approaches. But the thing that really unites and underpins everything that we do is our focus on the moments that matter. Those crucial moments, often small, everyday moments of awareness and action that really make the difference in the work that people do. And we use communication and learning to shape those moments for positive outcomes. So just a quick note before I hand over to Owen and James, we'd love to hear your thoughts and comments as we go through the webinar this morning. So please do type into the chat. If you do, please, and when you do, please make sure you change the setting to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your comments. Otherwise, I think the default in Zoom for some reason is just to panelists, and that means that other people can't see your comments. So please just change that. So today, Owen and James will be talking about using music to make messages stick. Over to you.
It's James and Owen's webinar. Sit back and relax wherever you are. Burnley, Bristol, or the Isle of Hoy. We'll be dropping some beats that we hope you'll enjoy.
Morning, everyone, and sorry to do that to you so early this morning. I'm afraid you won't be able to unhear that now. But of course, that's really what we're going to be talking about this morning, is the power of music to capture attention, to prompt recall, maybe to nudge us into action. And the reason that we're talking about that is because as L&D professionals, those are all the sorts of things that we're trying to do, really, aren't we? We're trying to engage and capture the attention of learners. We're trying to embed new ideas with them, to promote recall of those ideas, and maybe to prompt action in the workplace so that we're actually making a difference and delivering impact. So we want to talk about that today. A quick introduction. So I'm Owen Rose. I'm a partner here at Acteon and one of our consultant teams. And we'll be giving you some of the background into why we think music is an interesting and underused tool in learning and development. And so we want to give you some of the background and then share some practical examples of where we've used it as part of blended solutions to try and make a difference for our clients. And as we do all of this, we want to give you kind of some background to reassure you that this is based on research and scientific evidence, and I'll be assisted in that by my colleague, James Woodman. So James, maybe you could say hi as well this morning.
Good morning, good morning everybody. Nice to see you all here. I was watching the participants list like a hawk after playing the jingle to see how many people left after hearing the musical introduction. We're going to be sharing loads of musical ideas with you over the next hour or so. And throughout the webinar, I will be bringing you the science and research that backs up what we're saying. This is something that I find fascinating. I'm also part of the Acteon consultant team and a partner in a business like Owen. And I've been really exercising my library membership to the max to dig out and digest all the key papers and publications in this field so that you don't have to. You can just listen to us instead. Owen.
Thank you very much, James. Great. So we wanted to start with a simple and very unscientific experiment, really, just to, I guess, remind ourselves of how music can affect us, how it can connect with us, and how it communicates to us. So what we're going to do is we've got 3 music tracks that we're going to play one after the other. And for each of these tracks, we'd like you to listen to it just for a few seconds and then tell us in chat what it makes you think of, how it makes you feel. Does it recall a place or an event or a specific memory? Does it evoke an emotion? So it would be great if you could share that in chat, and we'll just have a look at the kind of responses and the way that these tracks affect each of us. So we'll play each one in turn, and I say after you've listened for a few seconds, perhaps you could just start typing into chat what it's making you think of, how it's making you feel, and what it makes you recall. So James, can we have the first track, please? Yes, so we've got, so drama has already appeared a couple of times. I feel like I'm in the cinema. That we've got concern. Movies coming up to good in heroic.
Down to watch the news is interesting. Something important. Interesting that it can give that sense of importance, urgent and important.
Magic and mystery. Yeah, absolutely. So clearly, definitely feelings evoked, and quite a similarity in the feelings evoked there, really. So there's a certain vibe to that music which seems to be connecting action, urgency, drama, anticipation. Absolutely. Great. So that's track 1. Let's have a try with track 2. Thanks, James. By far the most common word appearing in the chat is holiday. Obviously very prevalent perhaps in a lot of people's thoughts. I happen to be going on holiday myself starting tomorrow, which is great. But yeah, so a really different vibe there, really connecting relaxation, holiday, dancing, tequila, yes, dancing with a cocktail in hand. So again, a pretty common response there, some very common emotions evoked, but something much more relaxed, and maybe a bit more positive than the first track. So let's finish up with track 3 and see where that takes us. Thanks, James. James's personal playlist there, and yeah, again we've shifted again, and what we're getting out of this, it seems, is technology, robotic, modern, space and sci-fi, futuristic, current or latest trends. That's really interesting. That's quite an interesting one, isn't it? There's a sense there in that there's this sense of the future, sci-fi, futuristic, current or latest trends. So again, really interesting feelings being evoked there. So thank you all for your contributions there. As I say, a very unscientific experiment, but a few things that we can pick out from that. And I guess, in a way, none of them particularly would surprise us. So yes, music connects. It connects with moods, emotions, it connects with experience and memory. So we've seen that lots and lots being shared there in the chat. Secondly, that different music connects in different ways. Clearly, we saw that really, very different themes to those music, and those themes have meaning to us, and they connect with us in different ways. And third, and perhaps the most interesting and relevant to the kind of things that we're going to be talking about, we have some sense of common experience. So none of you have probably heard any of those tracks before. They're production music tracks that we just chose. There's nothing special about them. So you've probably never heard them before. And yet, this group of people on the webinar, who are essentially a random group of people, probably most of us never met each other before, we have similar reactions to each track. So there's something going on here about the way that music connects and its power to influence us, and potentially to influence us in common ways. So James, it's probably a good time to hand over to you and just talk about bit about what's going on here.
Thanks, Owen. Yeah, so this isn't a surprise. I don't think any of you need us to tell you that music influences your emotions and your thoughts. We all know that, I think. But what is it that makes that happen? Well, this is a huge research field. It's enormous. And there are studies that show that music can make you smarter, happier, physically stronger. You should remember that when you're at the gym. If you're interested, the evidence says that you should pick familiar music where you know when the peaks will come, so you can push yourself harder during those bits. We know that music evokes old memories for all of us, and that it can help you create new ones. Music makes you remember stuff, often without trying, not just remembering the lyrics and the melody, but also you're remembering the context, the feelings, the events, the tiny details that surround the experience. Music can change how you perceive time. We're going to come back to this later. It can boost your immune system. It can even help repair brain damage. When you listen to music, there is so much stuff going on inside your head. Your ear picks up a musical sound or rhythm, and parts of your brain are immediately processing that signal so that you can start to make sense of the sounds. These are vibrations in the air. But of course, a computer can do most of that bit. For a human being, the experience of listening is much more than just technical processing. And I'm sure you know that the activity in your brain is regulated by chemicals, and music has the power to directly manipulate that neurochemistry. Music can trigger the release of all sorts of hormones, endorphins, adrenaline, dopamine. This is good stuff. These are the drugs that can soothe and comfort you. They can get you excited. They can control your stress level. They can regulate your blood pressure, your heart rate, make you experience pleasure. And perhaps this is why listening to music can be addictive. And as the sounds trigger this activity in your brain, there's a process called spreading activation. Loads of other neurons that have absolutely nothing to do directly with hearing or music start firing in sympathy. And that changes the way the brain responds. If you listen to music straight after you've had a nap, you will be less sleepy. These reactions are not superficial. Neuroscientists talk about us being hardwired for music. And one of our clients at Acteon supports people living with dementia, and I've seen the impact of music on people who've become completely unresponsive through degenerative brain disease. If you give them headphones, play their favourite music, their eyes will light up, they can start moving, singing, dancing. If you did an MRI scan like this, then you would see new brain activity. And so fundamentally, we know that memories associated with music, learning associated with music, those things never really fade away. This is powerful. What we're talking about today in this webinar is a fundamental part of who we are as human beings. Back to you, Owen.
Great, thanks very much, James. That's right. So we know that music is a powerful tool for influence and communication. And we also know that it's purposely used for this. So we're going to talk in a bit about using it within the kind of fields that are relevant to us on this webinar in terms of learning and development and communication. But we all know that it's used purposefully, widely to institute attitude and behavior. And I mean, the advertising industry is probably a particularly good example of this. I'm sure we all have our favorite or pet hate adverts, and that may be largely due to the music that's used, how it makes us feel, whether it's it generates a positive emotion or a negative emotion. Maybe there are adverts that have increased your recognition or association with a brand because of the music they chose. Maybe in some cases it's even potentially influenced your purchasing decisions. And there are other contexts too where music is specifically used to influence our behavior. So the retail environment, where we know that retailers will often use music as the background to a shopping experience, and the type of music that they choose will probably depend on the type of retailer they are, might even depend on the time of day, might vary within different parts of the store. So we're familiar with these things. There are other examples. You might think about things like call center music, where the music is being used again to try and influence our mood and behavior. Music is used for some medical procedures where the practitioners are trying to induce a particular state, usually relaxation, in the patient as part of a medical procedure. Lots of other examples too. And so we thought it'd be interesting if you would be okay to share in chat when music has influenced your attitude and behaviour. So do you have a favourite advert that has perhaps made a brand more sticky and more memorable for you? Have you had a shopping experience where you've been really conscious actually that music maybe has changed that experience? Have you had that call centre experience, either good or bad? Maybe it's call centre music that's relaxed you, or call centre music that's made you even more annoyed about having to wait to get some service. And there might be other things too. We had a really interesting, we were talking about this before with another group, and they talked about really interesting example of music being used during brain surgery, where the surgeons actually wanted a particular part of the brain to be stimulated as part of the surgical procedure. And they actually were playing specific music to this individual in order to stimulate particular neurons in the brain in order to get the responses that they wanted to, in order to be able to carry out the procedure that they had to. So do share away if you can think of the things. Tell us about your favourite adverts, maybe, and the music that they were accompanied by. Jet to airplane stuck on the runway. Okay, Jess Clear. Christmas music, nice in December. Absolutely, yeah, that's right. So context being very important. Absolutely, and I totally agree with that. There's lots of lovely Christmas music, but when you hear it before December, it can fall a bit flat. Okay, John Lewis advert every Christmas. Yeah. So Hannah, is that a good use of music? Is it evocative? Does it make the brand more attractive, memorable for you? Yeah, the Guinness TikTok advert is an absolute classic. And it's interesting that I think that advert, for those that remember it, is, I mean, you can certainly Google it as well. If you Google Guinness TikTok, you'll find it. It's almost entirely about the music. It's very, very powerful.
It's a very interesting point from Becky about using music as a kind of conscious choice for regulating your mood, because I think, yes, I guess a lot of what we're talking about is a sort of passive reaction to music. So the music shaping your mood or shaping your emotions, and the music having been chosen by somebody else, but actually consciously thinking, I want to regulate my mood. I want to choose what I listen to in order to make that conscious shift. I think it's really positive, interesting point.
Very interesting point there. Yes, for football matches, different playlists at half time. Absolutely. Yeah, so using music to try and energize the crowd. Interesting as well that the Cadbury's drumming gorilla advert to Phil Collins it's been highlighted as well a couple of times. Interesting that and the Guinness ad, these were ads that were released really quite a long time ago, but they really stay with us, and we've also remembered the brands associated with them as well. Great stuff. Well, thanks everyone for that. So it's great to see. And I think, again, something that we're all fairly conscious of, that music can be used to influence our attitudes and behaviours, something that we've probably all experienced. But James, maybe just tell us a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes here.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so after all this discussion, maybe you're wondering what evidence we can find to show that music really does change how we act. And there's so much research and data out there on this, but the studies that I think are particularly interesting from our point of view are the ones that are conducted in what you might call real environments, so not in an artificial psychology lab setting, but in more natural circumstances, so that really they can try to account for people's everyday reactions to musical experiences. And we're all used to hearing music everywhere, very common thing, so it's natural to have music in lots of different places and to see how people respond. And scientists have investigated how the tempo of music affects consumer behaviour in different environments. And consistently, they've found a very clear link between the speed of the tempo, the fastness of the music or the slowness of the music, and the speed of the behaviour. So we know that people move around shops more quickly when they hear fast music. They stay longer when they hear slow music. Interestingly, when the music's slow, they also tend to spend more. you get pretty much the same results in a restaurant. If you hear fast music, you'll tend to eat more quickly. Slower music leads to slower eating and more drinks bought at the bar. That link between tempo and behaviour speed is well established, and it's something that people consciously do in retail environments. When you hear music, it's consciously chosen often. Maybe things like that Jet2 aeroplane on the runway. I'm not sure of the benefit of playing Jess Glynn when you're waiting to take off, but perhaps if you want to get people off an aircraft quickly or through a particular area of an airport, you do that by putting on music that has a fast tempo and that gets people moving more quickly. Absolutely, the point that you can affect driving and things like that by what you're listening to. All of this has been researched and is demonstrated consistently. But can music influence what you buy as well as how fast you do it? Well, it may not surprise you to learn that the answer is yes, it can. If you're buying a bottle of wine in the shop and this is playing in the background, then you are significantly more likely to buy a bottle of French wine compared to what happens when this is playing in the background. What do you think? Well, it's music from the beer cellar, but if you're buying wine, then you are significantly more likely to pick wine from Germany, as Nick has said in the chat. Would you expect music to change your behaviour like that? Well, research has found consistently, again and again, that it does. This has been looked into for decades. And music influences the selections you make. But interestingly, what has also been found is that very few people attribute their action to the music. It's often unconscious. And what we think is happening is that the music stimulates associations. So in that specific example with the wine, the music is priming your brain with thoughts of Frenchness or Germanness. And this can happen in any context and with different kinds of music, depending on what is being desired. And it goes back to this idea of spreading activation in the brain that I mentioned earlier. The activity in the brain triggered by the music is spreading. It's also activating other knowledge. It's evoking a reaction, and crucially, it's bringing back memories, existing things in your brain. It's prompting feelings that create a particular frame of mind. And it's no surprise that being in a particular frame of mind means that you're more likely to behave in certain ways. The music is shaping the moment. And talking of evoking a reaction and prompting certain feelings,
It's James and Owen's webinar. Sit back and relax wherever you are. Burnley, Bristol, or the Isle of Hoy. We'll be dropping some beats that we hope you'll enjoy.
Yeah, apologies again, but once you have a jingle, you do have to sort of keep using it. So we just had to play that again. So there's we have a radio show. You can probably guess not based on that jingle. Yeah, I don't know why we keep getting the rejection letters. But it's become a transition point now. So we've kind of set the background, and I don't think we're probably sharing anything that you didn't already know, but maybe giving it in that context and perhaps awakening that idea that music is a powerful tool for communication and a powerful tool for stimulating recall, for influencing behavior. But it's not used very much in learning and development. And we think that it can be a really effective part of the blend. And we mean as part of a blend, it has a part to play. We're not suggesting that music is going to transform the way that learning and development is delivered, or we should all go over to running our own radio shows or composing our own jingles. But as part of a blend, it can be a very powerful tool. And at Acteon, we're working hard to make sure that where it's appropriate to use it, we are harnessing the benefits of music. And I think as James and Sarah have said already at Acteon, we are all about trying to help our clients achieve positive impacts. And to do that, we focus on what we refer to as the moments that matter. So those key moments of attitude and action that shape what people do and shape the outcomes that result from it. And we're working to use communication and learning to shape those moments for positive outcomes. And music can be a really helpful part of the blend that does that. So we just want to give you 3 quick examples of where music is enhancing a learning and development blend. And hopefully there'll be some practical things in there that might be valuable to you. They might even influence the way you think about these things or do these things. So we'll just go through each one. And as I say, I hope there'll be some interesting stuff in there for you. So 3 different ways where music can help enhance the learning and development blend. The first one is just thinking about something as simple as background music. So this is something actually that probably learning and development professionals are using, maybe quite frequently. So it might be as part of an e-learning module. Maybe you're making a video or an animation that's part of a learning and development intervention, and you need some background music for that. And often in these kind of things, you or whoever's developing it for you will use some stock music from a production house. So just to think about how we use that and the relevance of background music for the effectiveness of the training, we're going to just do a little exercise here. So imagine for a moment that you're creating some fire safety training. Okay, it's a blended program, all sorts of different interventions that you will be using to enhance fire safety awareness and safe behaviour in the workplace. Now, one of the pieces that you're creating is a very short animation, an animated video, to communicate a critical message. So what you want people to do, the behaviour you want to influence, is if someone sees a fire, detects a fire in the workplace, the first thing you want them to do is to close the door on the fire. It's to stop the fire spreading, to stop the smoke escaping. It's a critical action, the most important thing that they can do immediately. So you're creating your animation as part of this blended safety, health and safety training program to drive this key behaviour of closing the door on the fire. It's a short animation, maybe 2-3 minutes long at most, and you need to choose some background music for it. So think about that context. And we're going to do, again, another little unscientific experiment. We're going to play you 3 tracks. We want you to have a quick listen to them and then think about which one instinctively you would choose to try and reinforce that crucial message about closing the door on the fire. Okay, so the way we'll do this is we'll play each track so you can have a listen, have a think, and then we're going to run a little poll just to see what the choice of this group is. And so first up and through, just listen. The second, and when we run the poll, we'll play the tracks again. So if you need a quick reminder of what they are in order to make up your mind, you will hear them twice. Okay, so let's do that. Let's play our 3 tracks that we could be candidates for use in our fire safety training video. Okay, so that's track 1. Let's have a listen to track 2. Okay, a very different sort of sound there. So we'll move on to track 3 now. That's interesting. So what we want you to do now, we're going to play the tracks again, and while we play them again, Sarah's going to put up a poll so you can vote for the track that you would use. So there's no right answer here, by the way. It's just interesting to see how these tracks affect people, what they make you think of. So let's just run through them all again. Thanks, James. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for voting. So Sarah, if we could reveal the results, please, that would be fantastic. So you can see that, I hope everyone can see that now with those poll results. There's a very clear preference for track 3.
Very clear.
Interestingly, no interest at all in track 2, and a bit of interest in track 1. And that's really interesting. I mean, I think certainly going back to that, the first experiment that we did and the way that music speaks to us in that same way, there certainly is more of that health and safety vibe in track 3. Now, as we say, there's no right answer to this. There's just, and of course, in reality, the choice would also depend on the kind of graphics perhaps you were using, the text in your animation. It wouldn't be as simplistic as this. But as you might have gathered, this is a specific, this is a particular example, and it comes from work that we did with a client where we were working on health and safety training piece, and we did have to create an animation to emphasize this key behavior. So I just want to play you that animation so you can hear and see the choice that we made. Just have a listen. So we actually used track 2, which was probably the least obvious of the 3 for a health and safety training video. In that case, we used it specifically because what we were trying to do was to create a dissonance, a surprise. We actually wanted to use something people wouldn't expect to try to make this message more memorable. And it actually worked incredibly well. In fact, this was really very, very successful. And it's still referred to years after delivery as the close the door animation, which is a fantastic response really to this, because of course that is the exact message that we wanted people to remember. Now we don't have the data, I'm afraid to say, in terms of actual impact. Is there a measurable difference in people closing the door if they discover a fire in the workplace? However, certainly in terms of that stimulating recall and delivering that key message, this animation was incredibly effective. So again, there is no right answer here. We're not saying that this was precisely the right choice of music and that the choice of those any of those other tracks wouldn't have worked. The message is more to say, if you're choosing background music, you'll have seen from everything that we've talked about in this webinar so far, it may be in the background, but it is going to influence people. It is going to stimulate emotion. It is going to change the way that they respond to the messages that you're trying to get across. So it's really worth thinking carefully about the music you're choosing and how that can contribute to the message that you're trying to communicate. And in some cases, you might even do what we did here, which is to actually deliberately choose music to try to make the message memorable by creating a bit of surprise or a bit of dissonance. Okay, so that was one example. That was background music. I want to next talk about a second opportunity to use music as part of the learning and development blend. And this is using music to stimulate behavior in the workplace. It's really quite an interesting and powerful way to take learning, to extend the learning out of the classroom or out of the digital module, whatever it is, so that you may have done some structured learning, face-to-face session, e-learning module, whatever that is, and then to help people recall and act on what you were communicating to them, you can use music in the workplace as a trigger or a prompt, and that's usually used as part of a campaign over time. And I want to share what I think is a really fantastic example of this. And I should say this is not an example of Acteon's work. So we were not responsible for this campaign. It's a campaign that was run at Co-op a few years ago as part of a customer service training program called Service Rocks. Acteon does a lot of work with Co-op, we've done some very successful campaigning work with them, learning and development campaigning work, and we've used music in some of those interventions very effectively with Co-op, but we weren't actually responsible for this one. So Service Rocks was a program which was a blended program. There was face-to-face training, structured training delivered in the workplace. And the training was around core behaviours of quality service. So a warm welcome to customers, understanding whether the customer's needs were satisfied, whether their needs were being met, being active in the workplace. So creating a positive, active impression, not just kind of standing around. So real basics of customer service. And this program was designed to reinforce those. So there was this face-to-face, this kind of structured training in those core principles. But brilliantly, Co-op also created a playlist to remind people of those key actions. So they chose songs that were deliberately chosen to prompt on those key messages of a warm welcome, trying to ensure customer satisfaction, staying active in the workplace. And they integrated the playlist with the music that was played on the store radio. So it meant that within the working environment, as people were in the workplace, they were getting these musical prompts and nudges that just brought back those key messages of customer service to colleagues. I see. So yeah, Becky says, yeah, Co-op, it's fantastic. I mean, it's Service Rocks is still talked about. That's right. It was several years ago, I should say. I mean, it's an award-winning program. If you Google Service Rocks and Co-op, you can find the story if you want to find out a bit more about it. It was a very, very powerful example of the effectiveness as using music as a prompt to behaviour in the workplace. So that's something to really think about. Are there opportunities to do that in your workplace where you may have done some structured training, development, but then you need to think about how do we sustain those behaviours and how do we get those behaviours used in the workplace? And music could be an interesting way of helping to make that happen. And at this point, I'll hand over to James just to tell us a little bit more about what's going on here and why music is effective in this way.
Thanks, Owen. And this is a big subject, so I can't cover everything, but I can cover some of our initial thoughts, and I hope they're interesting. I suspect quite a lot of you probably already know Daniel Kahneman's work. You might have read this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Just in case you haven't come across his ideas before, he suggests that the brain has two modes of operating. He calls them System 1 and System 2. System 1 is our autopilot. It's fast, it's unconscious, it's automatic. Our brains do this most of the time without us even being aware of it. It's like riding a bike. And then about 3% of the time we shift our brain into System 2. That's slow, it's conscious, and it takes effort. We're looking for more information and we are consciously processing data. System 1 is brilliant at talking or walking, maybe catching a ball, but it doesn't always come to the same conclusions that System 2 would reach if we shifted modes and made a more reasoned decision. And so because we spend most of our time using System 1, that means most of the decisions we make in life are based on shortcuts. We respond automatically. We have to do so much stuff that's the way our brain has to work. We have to be on that autopilot in order to function. But of course, for us, a lot of training is about influencing behaviour in a moment that matters. We want to create opportunities for people to make positive choices. Often that means trying to interrupt existing routines. You might be trying to change existing automatic habits. You might be trying to create new patterns of behaviour. And to come back to music, listening is an inherently System 1 activity. I don't mean critical musical analysis or learning an instrument. I just mean everyday listening. And that means that you can use music to directly target that autopilot part of the brain. Catchy, memorable presentation of the right message in musical form, combined with reinforcement over time as part of a campaign, those make it more likely that you'll trigger the brain to respond in a useful way at the point where it's needed. How often has a song lyric or a tune popped into your head, even if it's from a song you didn't like very much? That's a picture of a baby shark, by the way. We know that music directs your attention. It helps to create sticky memories. On an emotional level, it helps to define your attitude to a brand or an idea. We're getting back to all those adverts we talked about earlier. And you can use all those things to hook the ideas you want to communicate into your listener's unconscious brain. And it's even better when you take advantage of the surprise that people experience when you bring music into a predictable corporate environment, communicating in new and unexpected ways. you force the unconscious brain to sit up and pay attention. It's not what's expected. And that means when you get to the moment that matters, the right message instinctively comes to mind. Oh yeah, we heard about this in that song. It's like priming the brain with ideas of Frenchness or Germanness. Maybe you still need System 2 to make a decision about what to do next, but the essential change is that you've interrupted the person's autopilot. You've created an opportunity for that conscious thought to happen. And so we can use this idea. We can harness the power of music and make it into a human-friendly nudge, something that can help people to direct their attention where we want them to in a moment that matters. And I'll hand back to Owen now to talk more about how this works.
Great, thanks, James. So we've talked about the importance of background music and really thinking about, are you using that effectively? Can you use it even more effectively to help your messages stick and to help prompt the right behaviours? We talked about music nudging or prompting appropriate behaviours in the workplace. So taking those messages out of the learning and development, out of the classroom or out of the e-learning module, and helping to prompt people when they're actually in the work. And the final example we want to share with you of a practical use of music in learning and development setting is actually using music to directly carry your message. So we're talking here about the power of song. So is there a key message, something really important, something you really want to make sticky and memorable that could possibly be delivered effectively as a song that will stay with people? And this is something we've done many times for a wide range of clients, and we've found it very powerful and very successful. So I just want to share one specific example with you. So this is a piece of work we did with a long-term client of ours called HC1. HC1 is probably not a household name, but they are actually the UK's largest care home operator. So they have over 400 care homes throughout the UK. They have over 25,000 staff, so they're a very significant operation. And we have lots and lots of different things with HC1, helping to support the organisation, helping support their learning and development of colleagues. But a significant piece of work we did with them a couple of years ago was supporting a major initiative around quality of life and well-being for their residents. So this was an extensive blended training and communication program for all colleagues to promote quality of life and well-being for their about 14,000 residents. And we did lots of different things. So there was e-learning with this, there was classroom training, coaching, very different workplace tools, all sorts of things. But one particular piece that we created was about promoting meaningful choice. So this was a key behaviour, one of the key behaviours that they identified as part of this programme. So in order to promote quality of life and well-being in residents, they wanted colleagues to consistently being promoting meaningful choice. And we can all relate to that. That's a very significant part of our own well-being, is the ability to make choices about what we eat, choices about what we wear, choices about what we're doing. So it's a key concept. It was very significant for them, and it was something that they really wanted to communicate the importance of this to colleagues. And we were running a workshop with them at their headquarters in Darlington, looking at 3 of these critical behaviours and thinking about the most effective ways to promote them in the workplace. And actually, it was colleagues at HC1. So one of the groups who'd gone off to work on ways of how to promote, how to help colleagues promote meaningful choice, had gone away to think about ideas, to do some creative brainstorming about ways to do that. And they came back into the group and they shared their idea, which was they said, we know the way to do this. We should have a song, and we know what the song should be. It should be Meghan Trainor's All About That Bass, only it should be all about that choice. And we should make the lyrics all about the importance of choice and promoting choice. So it's a fantastic idea, and this is something they found. It wasn't a suggestion that we made in the first instance. So they wanted to make a song, and they wanted basically to write some new lyrics for Meghan Trainor's song. Now, obviously, it's not quite as simple as doing that. Unfortunately, you can't just rewrite the lyrics of someone else's song and then play it to the same music without getting into all sorts of copyright and licensing issues. But there is a way to do this, and it's an approach that we've used, as I said, several times with clients before. So what you can do is you can create what's called a sound-alike song. So if you work with specialist music producers, you can create a song which has the essential characteristics of the original. So it sounds like the original, but it is actually a different piece of music. And obviously you create different lyrics to communicate the message that you need to communicate. And then what you've created is something which is essentially different from the original, while still sounding very similar. So it can still have that impact, that connection, that communication, but it's quite different. So based on this brilliant idea from our colleagues at HC1, we created a music video for them to promote this key message of helping colleagues to understand the importance of promoting meaningful choice. And so this is just one example of how we can use music to communicate a critical message. I'm just going to play the video now, just to close out this section, and then James will pick up after that. So this is the music video that we made for HC1.
Because you know I'm all about that choice, no trouble. I'm all about that choice, no trouble. I'm all about that choice, no trouble. I'm all about that choice. Yeah, it's pretty clear, I might be 82, but I can change my mind like I'm supposed to do. Cause I got freedom, it's common sense. The quality of life comes through my independence. So if it's breakfast time, or when I'm getting dressed, you give me time to choose, that's when I'm so impressed. If you got options for me, just change them up. Cause when it's meaningful, it's perfect, and I don't want it to stop. Now Gordon tells me that he likes to walk outside, where his mother's a little more likely to play cards with Clyde. But that's today and tomorrow, they both might have changed their minds. So for well-being to flourish, then go ahead and let us decide. Because you know I'm all about that choice, no trouble. I'm all about that choice, no trouble. I'm all about that choice, no trouble. I'm all about that choice.
Well, that's a lovely story to end with. We'll come back to your questions at the end, Anis, and any others that anyone else wants to bring up, because we'll be wrapping up soon, and we will, I hope, have 5 minutes for some questions. But we've got one more little surprise before we stop, because we wanted to run our own little psychology experiment with you today. You will remember, I'm sure, that we played our special jingle a couple of times during the webinar, and I know you're all keen to hear it again.
It's James and Owen's webinar. Sit back and relax wherever you are.
Now, don't start singing along in the chat just yet. Please keep quiet, because I want to ask you all a question. And I'd like you to write down the answer, Pete, please. So grab a pen and a bit of paper, or open a blank window to type into. Which 3 locations did the jingle list next? Just take 20 seconds, jot down the 3 places, and we'll find out what you remember. Which 3 locations came next in the jingle? Here it is again to prompt your memory.
It's James and Owen's webinar. Sit back and relax wherever you are.
So I'm going to give you 10 seconds to write down your answers. We'll be asking you to mark your work in a moment. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so we're going to mark our own work completely honestly if you put your pens down. The correct answers were, of course,
Burnley, Bristol, or the Isle of Hoy.
Burnley, Bristol, and the Isle of Hoy. So mark your own work. Sarah, please can we have the poll on screen now, and I'd like you to let us know how many you got right. 0, 1, 2, or 3 out of 3. Sarah, when you think everybody has put their answers in, let's have a look at the responses.
Impressive
Does this
recall.
mean everyone is in? Oh, Jessica got Isle of Hoy and has no idea where that is. It's the dot right up at the top, Jessica. Yeah, there's a good point. You could mishear them. It was challenging, perhaps. Sarah, can we have the results on screen, please? Interesting. Okay, so mixed results, I would say. So, I mean, interestingly, half of everybody in this room remembered at least one of those locations. Well, half remembered one, and if we add together 1, 2, and 3, we've got about 3/4 of people remembering some or all of what we wanted. It's interesting. I mean, this was very unscientific experiment to see how well those 3 places would stick. Because there's a lot of research that backs up the idea that music enhances the memory of an advert when the advertising slogan is presented in the form of a jingle. It may not surprise you to learn that advertisers have plenty of money to spend on this kind of thing, and so there has been a lot of very serious research carried out. Mixed results in this experiment, but maybe our jingle was just so bad that your mind filtered it out. I suspect actually a lot of the challenge comes when you have a message like that presented in musical form alongside lots of other competing musical messages. There have been plenty of those today, and that context, that competition with other music and other messages is a massive challenge for radio advertisers. Of course, in an L&D environment, we usually have the massive advantage that there is very, very little musical competition. People are not expecting music. They're certainly not expecting music to be used in some of the ways that we've talked about today. And that's why things like Service Rocks have been so effective. You can be much more confident about how your message will land because of that surprise element. There's plenty of evidence that music is a really powerful mnemonic device. When you want to remember things, music will help. I'm just going to hand back to Owen to wrap up, and then I can see there's been some questions scrolling by, so we will get to those before we finish the webinar. Thanks, and Owen.
Great. Thank you very much, James. Well, we are really at the end now, and I just hope that's been a useful hour for you, food for thought, perhaps 1 or 2 practical ideas. But essentially, we are very interested in the power of music to form a really effective part of learning and communication blends. And it is just part of the blend. There are lots of instances where it's either not possible to use music or it might not be the most appropriate format, but it certainly has something to add. And we're convinced it's a really underused format. When you think of how much emphasis is placed on the visual appearance of learning materials, I hope that what we've shared with you today will convince you that the audio elements of learning materials are also an opportunity to do some really effective communication, to prompt recall, to promote behaviour change, and to help you deliver the positive impacts that you want. So we'll be very happy to talk more about this. There's a link on the screen there, which Sarah has just put in the chat. So we have a little landing page where there's some more resources if you're interested in following up these ideas. But Sarah, perhaps with a few minutes left, thank you. I think you've been fielding questions from the chat as we've been going along. So maybe you could just let us know what people have been asking.
Yeah, we have some of them you've addressed already, so thank you for that. Anis is asking how easy it is to make something like the video that you played a couple of minutes ago. How long did it take to create?
Yes, in principle, it's not so difficult. The crucial thing really is that we work with a production studio who are also responsible for the jingle. I won't reveal who they are in case you feel like taking retaliatory action, but they, and that's really their business is kind of radio and ad work, and they're very experienced in creating sound-alike songs. So with a partner like that, it's relatively straightforward, where you have a source track to work from. Obviously, the lyrics are written by Acteon to combine the flow and the lyrics of the original with the messages that we want to communicate, and then we work with the production house to make the music. In fact, but I think, with that model in place, it really doesn't take very long at all. I think, Anis, you asked a question about timing. It actually took end to end less than 6 weeks to produce that video. And in terms of cost, obviously we're not appropriate to share specific figures, but it is not a particularly expensive solution. It may appear that it would be, but actually it is not. It falls within sort of completely normal budgets for digital learning and e-learning content. So it isn't something that's kind of unachievable. I think the important thing to say is that inevitably one does have to be careful with issues about copyright and licensing of materials. So we work with an experienced production studio who know how to tread that line and create something which is sufficiently different to, as far as possible, avoid any of those issues. But clearly, if you're doing something like that, that is an area that you need to be conscious of and be as careful as you possibly can not to potentially incur licensing or copyright issues.
And I think it's worth saying you've always got the option of creating something completely original. So there might be something in the style of whatever a 70s disco record or a 2020 techno track or whatever it might be. You could pick a style, a genre, even an artist, and say we're going to compose something in the style of this person, but it won't be a direct kind of reinterpretation of something that has been released. It would be a completely original piece of music that evokes the idea of their performance and their style. And with that, there's no question of any copyright issues.
A really interesting question from Rhiannon. Have you found that music can sometimes be interpreted differently with different age groups? And saying they talk a lot about what works for different generations in L&D, wondering how that might affect the intended message.
I don't know that we've got specific data to show differences, but I think what's interesting is that music is often pretty universal. If you think about the music that you hear now that's played on the radio, perhaps, a lot of it is music that's been around for a long time. There's new music that people of all ages listen to, and there's old music of all ages that people of all ages listen to. And so you probably don't want to choose music that is going to be exclusive. You don't want to choose music that is only going to appeal to a specific, very targeted group, except if they're the ones who you want to target, of course. But there are always going to be musical choices you can make that be very broadly relevant and that will appeal to everyone. I think at Channel 4 we made Barry White or a Barry White impersonator the face of health and safety, which was fantastically successful. A young workforce in the main, some of whom certainly won't have been listening to Barry White 40 years ago, but it's been a massive hit and has gone down very well, and Barry continues to be the face of health and safety.
I think what we found, Rhiannon, as well, to just perhaps is where we're using music and humour combined, or using music, there's a humorous twist to the music, that seems to connect across very broad age groups. So I think, an audience that may not perhaps be an older audience, to stereotype an older audience that may not be familiar with a more recent pop track, it might not be what they're listening to or what they would instinctively respond to, but they get the joke, they understand the humour that underpins it. So, but I think it's a really good point. And as like with all of these interventions, you need to understand your audience and be thinking about how you are speaking to their preferences and biases and so on.
And then just finally, it's not really a question, but Becky says, is it you I need to blame for not being able to listen to MC Hammer's Can't Touch This anymore?
Yeah, apologies, Becky. That was an Acteon creation by our colleague, Rebecca Trigg. So what Becky's referring to is asbestos awareness training at Co-op. We did a really interesting piece of work with Co-op around safety with regards to asbestos in their stores. They have thousands of stores all over the country. There's some of them are older premises. There's quite a lot of asbestos around, so you have to be careful. But what asbestos safety really boils down to for Co-op colleagues is really two simple behaviours. The first behaviour is don't touch it, and the second behaviour is report it. And so with a simple behaviour, which essentially could be described as don't touch this, an obvious song came to mind. And yes, we made a sound-alike song based on MC Hammer's Can't Touch This, which I think, I'm right in saying, Becky, had the fastest uptake of any e-learning module ever at Co-op. We were told by the Learning and Development Department there. So it seemed to be quite memorable. Thank you.
Yeah,
that's great.
It did indeed. Okay, I think we're slightly beyond our allotted time. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for all of your comments in the chat. It's been great to have the engagement. We really appreciate you joining in and adding great questions and comments. Thank you. We shared the link, but as it's shown on the screen, we've got resources page that we'll also send out in an email, and we've got a recording of this if you'd like to share it with anyone else. That would be great. But thank you all very much for joining, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thanks for joining.
It's James and